Okay, it says it's recording. So, hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us. I am so thrilled to be talking with Silky Joshi Malik, if I said that correctly.
Correct.
I'm very excited for this conversation. We're going to be talking today about politics, but specifically running for Congress. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yep, U.S. Congress.
So without any further delay, let's just dive into this.
Let's do it.
If you don't mind me asking, why did you decide to run for public office?
Well, in 2015, we all know was the craziest race to the White House possible. And I was I'd never been really super into politics and all of that. My undergrad was psychology, sociology. I just sort of had this naive assumption that the people in charge will always do the right thing because, the United States is a very young nation relative to the rest of the world. And it had kind of gone mostly okay besides a few blips. But like I always felt, oh, push comes to shove, like we ended up on the right side of democracy. The experiment was still, proving itself. And then 2015 happened, and I all of a sudden became very aware that, like, oh, if we don't get really involved and pay attention as regular people, the crazies, like the monkeys, take over the circus. And it was during that year, and then 2016, when I really started to pay attention, like who's running for office, like what is on my ballot, what does all this mean? And I started taking these trainings for how to run for office because I assumed, when I'm like 50, I'll run, Hillary will win, it'll be fine. But like this primary, this race has really taught me that people need to get involved. And then Trump won the election, and I got very it was very hard for me personally because I just felt like I felt there's a huge number of people in this country that didn't want people who look like me to be in this country, to run for office, to sort of make up the fabric of what it means to be American. And so then I started even getting more interested in, like, how do I run for office? Maybe I'll do it at 40 or 45. And then the race in my district had opened up. So for students who might not know what that means, there was a congressman named Ted Poe who had been in this seat for, I think decades. And he announced sort of unexpectedly his retirement, which meant that the seat was open. He was a Republican, but the seat was open, which kind of gives anyone a chance to make it happen because it wasn't so gerrymandered at the time. It is now.
Well, and also on top of that, since there was no incumbent,
exactly,
there was no incumbent advantage. So it leaves it more of a, as you well said,
anything can happen.
Yeah, exactly.
So when there's no incumbent and there's no incumbency advantage, that means anything can happen if you run a hard enough race, you put yourself out there. So both the Republicans and the Democrats had all these candidates who had started announcing very soon after Ted Poe announced his own retirement. And I still wasn't thinking I was going to run. But then I think about 3 months after Poe announced it, I realized, man, these are like all men running. As I'm a Democrat, so like I was paying attention to the Democratic primary, and I was like, why are there 5 guys running for this seat and there are no women running for this seat? And I don't think at the time that there was a woman even running on the Republican side. And I felt sort of, confused. It's like 2017. How are there no women running for this race? It's an open seat. And I kept waiting. So a few months had gone by. I kept waiting. And I realized that, man, I got to put up or shut up. If this is bothering me that much, that there's not a woman running. And I'd done some research that showed no woman had ever run for that congressional seat before.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you can go back pretty far and see who has run. And there was just not a woman who'd run Republican. I mean, you don't get to see the primary races, but you do get to see who were the 2 final in the general, pardon me. Yes. So that gave me even more of this sort of like, well, I got to do it. Who knows what's going to happen, but I can't let this seat in 2017 of all times in the history of this country just not have a woman run. So I decided to run. It was sort of not fully planned out and thought out, because in my mind I would be doing this many years from now. But I just, I looked at my husband and I was like, I think I need to run. I'm just gonna do it. Okay. And he's like, you do it. It's great. And he was super on board, but it wasn't like when people decide to run for office or get involved in politics, most people have mapped it out for a long time. It might be different now, but at least at that time, there were these folks who were like, I did student government. I, did this in college. I volunteered on all these candidate races, et cetera, et cetera. I've been wanting to do this since I was very young. And I just wasn't that person. I was very much an outsider to politics in general and the political machine.
Would it be fair to say then that you were motivated at a sense of responsibility, or
it was democratic duty? It was just this, like, I've always tried to be a really good citizen, and I always cared a lot about, because my parents are immigrants. I have like that typical immigration sort of stuck between two cultures thing. I am American, ethnically I'm Indian, I relate to both, and I've lived abroad. I know what it's like in other countries where when people don't get to be representatives, don't get to represent their own interests by running for office and getting a chance at being elected. I saw that. I heard stories of what it's like growing up in India if you weren't born into the right caste. All these things have always propelled me to be the best citizen I can be and to really care about my democracy, about democracy and my place in the democratic process. And that's what really pushed me, like, man, the people who are running right now, at that time, I was very worried. I was like, if Trump wins, it's going to be bad. And then he did one, and it was bad. We had the Muslim ban almost immediately. There were all these things just happening in succession within a few months. Mores of the presidency as a whole being ignored, things that were just immediately unethical. Just if you were remotely paying attention, you knew this is not what's supposed to be happening. The highest office in the land, maybe even the world, is just not being run properly. And regular people need to show up to the House after being elected and demand, accountability, demand that these rules be followed. This is not, we're not a banana republic. And to me, like I said earlier, I was very naive. I thought that the machinations of democracy in America just sort of happen, that this country, the presidency, is bigger than one person, but Trump's presidency really put that to the test and really showed that, okay, yeah, America has a lot of solid roots in its democracy, but it really, it's hanging on by a thread if people aren't paying attention and getting involved. These races are not always won by a landslide. It's 49-50. For most of these races, that means like our individual votes do matter, no matter what people say. And that was this duty. Like, I'm an American. I care about being an American. I care about what this country promises to those of us who are born here, those who immigrate here. And, as a result, I need to, like I said, put up or shut up, which I did. Just kind of announced and went from there.
I've known other people who have ran for Congress in my previous life. When I first started going to college, back when I was a community college student, I got to know one individual who ran for Congress, I was there for his recruitment.
Oh, interesting.
For the office.
Oh, yeah.
So that it's always interesting to hear, these stories. So to use that as a jumping board real quick, what impact did your decision to run, what impact did it have on you, your family, and your friends?
That's an interesting question. I don't have kids yet, so that's something I didn't have to factor in like many other parents who run for office. And that is a huge barrier for a lot of women, especially, is, and the research shows this, that the considerations you have to take into account when you're running for office are different for a man versus a woman, primarily because of the domestic duties that fall on women. Even if we work full time and have amazing careers, there's just this imbalance of who's responsible for the home and the family. That fortunately was not a problem for me. I got to be honest, even if I did have kids, I've got a good support system of people who I know would step in and take care of that for me. But I didn't work while I was campaigning, which makes it easier to campaign. It's exhausting. It's like a 24/7 job. I mean, I always joke that it was the best diet ever because I like accidentally lost 7 pounds in 5 months because you just don't have time to eat and you're so tired. And if you have some time, you really want to take a nap instead of eating a meal. My husband was very supportive. He did not quit his job, of course, but he was there for me nearly 24/7, which makes a big difference. It's fantastic to have a supportive partner to sort of lift me up, because there are moments you don't believe in yourself and it's really hard and something happens and you don't know how to deal with it. You need someone who believes in you. And my friends believed in me. My family believed in me. It was amazing.
I was going to say, political scientists, we love watching the polls. We love digesting what does this mean in the
Right.
news media. We see how they talk about the horse race, right? Who's ahead now? What can they do to get, who's the one who's like second in place? What can they do to get better?
Yeah.
We hear that. I never thought about what is it like to be on that other side, to be a candidate and hear polls that come out that may not be in your favor. Well, if you don't mind me asking, what was that like?
You feel a huge sense of responsibility, which means your failure means more because there are people who invest in you financially, they invest in you emotionally. I was always blown away by the people who showed up to block walk, like strangers who would just like, I want to block walk. I like your platform. I think we need back then I was considered very young at 33 to run for office, which is hilarious. Like if you're watching this and you're in your teens or 20s, that sounds crazy, but people were accusing me of being far too young to run for office at 33, which I'm now 38, which I feel ancient. I'm like, oh my God. But back in the day, you started your political career for real in your late 30s. But you feel a lot of responsibility seeing folks come up and invest in you in all these different ways. And when you can't produce the results, you take it hard. It's hard because you want to be the best for the people who believe in you and it's no joke showing up to block walk. That's free labor, man. It's exhausting. Making calls, all of that.
Remember I mentioned in my previous life, when I first started going to college, I had already been volunteering for a political party here in Texas. Right. And I was one of those people that would go door to door.
Yeah, the true believers, man.
I'm not gonna lie, that was one of the scariest things I've done. Knocking on random people's doors and go, hey, I want to talk about politics.
I loved it. But to be fair, when you're running in a primary, you are contacting voters who are going to be friendly towards you because they're your same party. So I never had any craziness happen. Thank God. Because you kind of do it by yourself. And I guess I got lucky that nothing really bad happened, but it can be. There were some folks who were very much of the mind, I don't know, knocking on strange doors. That sounds scary. It can be intimidating.
It also might depend upon what district.
100%. I live in Montrose. It's like weird and amazing out here. Nothing phases people over here.
It sounds like an offset then from Austin.
Yeah, a little bit. I think so. It's nice. I love it. I always tell my husband, I don't think I can live anywhere normal. It's so nice and weird here.
I hear that.
I feel cool by proximity.
You mentioned it a moment ago, your party affiliation. So obviously, if I heard you correctly, then you ran as a Democrat.
Correct.
Why, if I can ask this question without getting too political, why the Democrat Party?
I had a few people ask me that on the trail, which I thought was pretty funny. A few Republicans, because I believe in the Second Amendment. We own guns. There's all these things that are very, I guess, considered conservative, but to me, they aren't. They're more Texas than they are anything else. And when you talk about these issues that matter to people, like, for instance, the Republican Party is very much trying to get rid of Social Security right now, Medicare, Medicaid. There's this like secret not secret, but like low down push underneath in the party to push for that. I don't believe in that. I believe people pay into this. They should always, this is like our insurance. People have paid into it. I believe that for healthcare, we pay so much in taxes to cover people who don't have healthcare, and we are just paying out the nose for something we could have better control over. There's all these issues that we all sort of unify on, regardless of party affiliation. You're a political scientist. You understand that we agree about more things than we disagree. And a large part, you know, my dad was a Republican, but even growing up, I had this sense that the Republican Party felt less arms wide open to immigrants and people of color and people who maybe have a different sexual orientation and women in general, especially with regards to, for me, an important issue that I care a lot about is access to reproductive health care. And that is something I believe very strongly in. I've always believed very strongly in. And the party that offers me that is the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party is this huge tent and this huge, just so many different types of people, which is why the joke is like, we don't fall in line the same way as our friends on the other side of the aisle, because there's so many different things we believe in and we're fighting for. And I think that's what sort of, a lot of people don't care about, you know, education stuff, but a lot of people do, but we can all sort of find our place in the little things to fight for under the banner of this party and in, you know, the general platform. So that's what has always spoken to me. And my dad and I used to argue about this a lot when I was younger.
For me, political parties, both Democrats and Republicans, I like to talk about them in the context of sports teams. I'm not big into sports whatsoever, but the division.
Yeah, it's too intense. It's stupid. I mean, we're seeing the ramifications of that right now. Look what's happening in the House at this moment. This is embarrassing.
Oh, the election of the Speaker of the House.
Yes, if you're watching this and it's no longer 2023, we don't have a functioning House of Representatives at the moment because the Republicans cannot get their house in order and elect someone.
Well, so I think also we could throw in there real quick that yes, the Republicans did win the control of the House in 2000 in this last election in 2022. Yeah.
I'm having a hard time keeping track.
I know. But at the same time, they barely got a majority. So this is it's
a tricky game they're playing, and I'm not really quite sure what the end result is. But at the end of the day, the party that really roots for a functioning democracy seems to be the Democratic Party year in and year out. And that's sort of where I have my home. And at the same rate, if there's stuff I don't agree with, the great part is there's like very progressive factions in the Democratic Party. And that's sort of where I align myself with. But the people who within the party that don't always align with me, they aren't advocating for things that are egregious or heinous or anti-American, anti-woman. Like there is a lot of, hey, I don't really agree with you, but at least you still believe in civil rights and you aren't trying to do anything too crazy. So that's I want to disagree on normal things. We cannot disagree about things like civil rights and hatred and things like that, right? Like there's no disagreement there.
One of the things that when I was in college, I'm still in college.
I know we'll be forever, man.
that's the way it feels like. But when I was an undergraduate student, one of my professors, he talked about political parties like this, that they have different set of priorities, but they both want what's best for the nation.
Ideally, that's how it's supposed to be. I mean, as a Democrat, I don't want to like not have a party we can kind of battle it out with to find like the best solution to things, but that's not what's been happening for almost 10, 15 years now. It's just gotten worse. Since Obama, it's gotten really dysfunctional, and we're seeing a lack of progress, and we're seeing that come home to roost now, right? With other countries that are going to keep sort of passing us by in things like technology. I mean, we're losing brilliant people to other countries who are immigrating because we have such a dysfunctional, non-working immigration system that people who are, you know, who can bring fusion technology to us and like making it, like they're going to Canada or they're going to France. They're going so many other places besides here. It's because we can't find common ground because there's one side that's just not playing by the rules. And it's not healthy for democracy. I don't want to just be in the party that's in charge of everything. That's how you slide into autocracy, right? I don't want that.
Students who've taken me before, they have heard this ad nauseum from me.
Mhm.
I love political competition. I love that loyal opposition. I love the fact that the other side. And by the way, this is a question I'm going to have for you, Silky. For me, one of my problems that I have with politics today is branding the other side, whoever that other side may
Right.
be, whether it's Democrat, whether it's Republican, regardless. We brand the other side of my views as the enemy.
Right.
So if you don't mind me asking, did you brand your opponent as an enemy? And did they brand you as an enemy?
So when you're running in a primary, it's a little different.
True.
So I tried to be like, to me, I'm not this weirdly ambitious, competitive person. And you find a lot of that in politics. That's not really why I am interested in politics. I'm not a win at any cost sort of person. So I just tried to, and I write about this extensively in my book. I tried to keep everything really positive. We did have one person in the primary, one of the candidates, who tried to start some nonsense and was messaging me and the other candidates and trying to spread rumors about the so-called front runner of our race. And I saw the email and I called my campaign manager and I was like, what is this? This is wrong. We need to contact Todd and let him know that this is what so-and-so is saying about him and sending out to people. So that's what I did. And I told the other candidates, I'm like, you guys can do whatever you want, but I'm telling Todd that I received this email because this is not the right thing to do. This is not, the Republicans can do whatever they want. I will not be a part of Democrats tearing Democrats down in such an underhanded way. It's one thing if someone has actually done something awful and you have a moral responsibility to bring it to light. But being politically opportunistic is not something I believe in. And I was lucky enough to have some, like the other folks in my race, be mostly in line with that, which was nice. It made it a more positive experience for me. And again, like I get to leave the whole experience a little more naive than maybe people in very, very tight primaries where it gets knuckle dragged out, sort of uncomfortable and outright mean and petty. I didn't have to deal with that.
That's one of the things that's interesting to me is viewing how we view the other side. We obviously we have two opposing major political parties, and obviously they are kind of like a sports team, like
Right.
the Houston Texans.
Yeah.
You can tell I'm a huge sports fan. The Houston Texans with the Dallas Cowboys, right?
Right.
There's this huge rivalry, and we see the other side as just the absolute worst of the worst.
Yeah.
I don't like that. While opposition, the Democrat Party, the Republican Party, they are designed to push again. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here.
Yeah.
But they are there to push against one another. But branding as an enemy, an enemy is someone you go to war with.
Right.
An enemy is someone that you eradicate because they are threatening your existence.
That's the problem with what we've seen in the last few years, right? This
yes,
sort of like, oh, so-and-so is going to destroy America. And I try to be objective. And I have this conversation with people often, like, oh, well, Democrats are really bad. I'm like, okay, what do they do? Well, they just, they're so annoying with the pronouns. I'm like, okay, cool. I can give you that, like, liberals can be very annoying about some of this stuff, especially the older we get. And like young people want to say, fine, young people can be very annoying to us older folks. Liberals are annoying. What about the other? Like, we need to keep perspective. And that's what frustrates me, is when folks try to equate that one side is the same as the other. And I think at one point in history, that's an argument that could have been made not too long ago, that there was this huge overlap between, these are politicians making politician deals. They're doing what benefits them. Hopefully it benefits America, but there isn't this huge divide like we've seen now, because there is one that is just, it's gone past the sports team thing, right? At the end of the day, Texans don't make it to the playoffs. They don't make it to the Super Bowl. Cowboys do. I'm happy because it's a team from Texas.
Thank you. Yes.
I hate them most of the year, but I'm happy if they win because at least it's a team from Texas. We've completely lost that in American politics at the moment. And I'm very partisan, and I do see that it is the Republicans who are just sort of rotting it right now. And we're seeing the results of that. And I hope that they can get their stuff in order, because it's quite honestly very exhausting and it keeps real work from getting done. If I have to argue with you that this, that the insurrection was an insurrection, we're not arguing about facts now. And you're saying it was just an unplanned protest. Okay, cool. How can we have productive conversation if there's an completely ignoring of fact and reality? I hope we move away from it. Like you said, it would be nice to sort of feel like we're all on the ultimate same team. And it doesn't feel like that anymore.
Yeah. So on that note, branding one side or the other as an enemy, let me ask you, what kind of get out the vote efforts did your campaign use?
So popular opinion on this is that you've got to block walk. So you've got to, get out and meet people, talk to them, go where they are. We tried to do something, we did that, but we also tried to do something a little different where we held campaign events in different places. So we did one at a gaming facility right down the way, just to meet different folks who don't usually get in interaction with candidates or people running for office. So different bars and pubs, ice cream shops, some restaurants, just setting up in different parts around the district that candidates don't typically go to, because I felt it was very important to meet people where they are and give them a chance to get involved and sort of meet a candidate. And it was fun. It was nice to do that. It was very different, and no other candidate had done that. And I think taught me a lot about what is important to me as a person and meeting other people, and why that should be something we do in politics.
Awesome. So what was the campaign trail like in just overall then?
Like I said, it's really exhausting. The amount of stress, you're just stressed because there's not enough time to do all the things you're supposed to do. You've got to keep it together and always be presentable and prepped and have answers to questions. And there are a few times someone asked me something and I had no idea. And I was like, wow, I really got to prep even harder to make sure when people ask me stuff, I have a working knowledge of all kinds of random crap. Because you are running, so that when you're running for Congress, you do have to know about the federal issues and also the intersection of that with what matters locally. So things like our flooding issues, because Harvey had just happened the year prior, the tax day flood had happened that year. So things like that, just trying to make an argument for why having someone in Congress who can advocate for the district will make a difference. And we do see the difference. The person who did win the race, Dan Crenshaw, he's not been advocating. I mean, we're a district that has a flooding issue, us and Texas 7. And he's not advocating for the things that Lizzie Fletcher, who's the one who won in the district over, is. You see such a difference, right? And that's what sort of is upsetting, because man, we have like real issues. Why are you in Congress talking about pronouns? I do not care about that. Can you please help me make sure my house doesn't flood this year? And like that's missing because we weren't able to elect someone who was actually going to go and argue for those things and do their best to secure money for our district to shore up our infrastructure.
One of the most frustrating things within politics, I say this now, I said this back then in my previous life, one of the most frustrating things is when you don't win, or when your side doesn't win.
It's frustrating. Yeah.
It absolutely is. Yeah. Okay. So what then was your most memorable moment on the campaign trail?
I was trying to think about this some time ago, and I think it was the campaign kickoff party because I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what it was going to look like. I don't think I'd ever made a speech in front of people about myself and my life and my motivation to run to care about something and put myself out there. I mean, you're in research. I've done conferences. I've been a teacher. I've done all these things, but then putting yourself out there and being very vulnerable to this giant group of people at this party was very hard. But I was so blown away by the support I had right out the gate. I was not expecting. I was honestly worried that I was going to show up to an empty room, and I didn't, and it was amazing. And it's still, we got published in a newspaper, all our photos. It was like such a big deal, and it made me feel really legitimate in that moment, and not so young because I was considered too young to run. I felt like a full-on grown-up in that moment.
If I remember correctly, the age requirement is 25 years old
Yes.
for the U.S. House of Representatives.
And now we have some guy, Maxwell Frost, out of Florida, I think. He's very young. He's now the youngest member of Congress, and he's 25, I think, 25 or 26, which is amazing. That's what I think we need.
One of the things, I jokingly say this, I'm not an ageist. What I mean by that is, if you are qualified to run, that is at the age of 25, go for it.
I don't know, man. These 80-year-olds need to step out. They need to step aside.
Oh, that is one of the potentially the largest argument you hear for term limits.
I know, and I'm not really. I'm opposed to term limits. There's a lot of arguments why it becomes dangerous to impose term limits at the congressional and Senate level because you lose institutional knowledge that way, and as a result, it gives lobbyists way more power over new congressmen and senators. But I mean, Dianne Feinstein, Mitch McConnell, these people are old. They need to. I was so happy to hear that Pelosi was retiring. Good for her. Go live out your golden days. You deserve it. You've earned it. Too old. I say our president might be a little too old too, but it's the best we got at the moment. So
well, it's the only one we got at the moment.
I know it's not ideal. It's a gerontocracy we've got right now. It's not great.
So you've hinted at this once before, and so just talking with you, I feel like I need to ask this, if you don't mind.
Of course.
What were some barriers that you felt that you went through on this run for the U.S. House of Representatives?
So one of the biggest barriers to getting involved in politics, and research shows this, is the financial barrier. A lot of the people who get involved in politics do it because they come from that world. Either you're a rich person or you're an Ivy Leaguer. I mean, in the district next to mine, well, now I'm in Texas 7, but at the time I wasn't. I think there were 7 candidates, 5 of which were graduates of St. John's. So, which is, I mean, that's the school you go to if you're a senator and your kid needs to go to school. These are the wealthiest of the wealthiest of the wealthiest in Texas and in Houston go to St. John's. This school is, I think, in the southern part of Texas, one of the like the richest people, the River Oaks people. I mean, it's just this whole different world. And I remember thinking, how can we have 5 candidates have graduated from this school running for Congress? There's just this pipeline from, wealthy, elite, politically connected people into office. And you see that the person who is the front runner of our race, came from a lot of money. And when you come from money, people who have money, and that makes it so much easier to fundraise. And it's just a huge barrier.
Let me for those who are watching, typically you have what's known as campaign fundraisers. You raise money for your campaign. Now, typically, not always do you use your own money from your own personal bank account. You have these fundraisers. Last time I heard, now this might be dated information by now, But last I heard, it cost $1 million just to be a potential candidate in
Depending on the race, yeah.
a
Which
U.S.
is
House of
crazy,
Representatives,
right?
which
That's
means
crazy.
one of the things that you're doing, you are doing two important things you're doing is getting people to asking them for your vote
Right.
and fundraising.
Right. That's I mean, that's a huge part of it. And I wasn't, fully well versed and well educated on what that means and what that looks like. I could do a better job now that I've been in this world for 5 years. But at the time when you really are a true outsider and a newcomer, you don't know how you're supposed to, rub elbows and schmooze people to get them to give you money. And you need that money to print out signs and pamphlets. And, there's this whole database you pay a monthly subscription for called VAN that gives you voter information about who are the people you should be reaching out to. This person voted last time. They'll probably vote again. And if you can get to them, they might vote for you. And that's thousands of dollars a month just for that access to that database. It's really expensive. And I'm an advocate for publicly funded elections. I think that's what we should have here in America. I don't know if that will happen, but that's something I believe very strongly in because it's such a huge bar for entry for regular people. And I think a country run by people who know what it means to be rich. And so this is something, when you run for office, you have all these one-liners. You got to pack in your platform with these zingers to let people remember what you stand for. So there's one thing I said all the time because it was very important to me. It's very true. I actually grew up very poor, not on the street homeless, but far below the poverty line. I was a free lunch kid. There were times we had our lights cut off. School lunch really was a thing that mattered. There are lots of people like me who grew up like that. And I remember saying on the trail, we have all these rich people going to Congress, debating what they should take away from regular people, what, charity or handouts they need to cut back on because these people don't deserve it. Or we're just, it's just a waste of money. We're just hemorrhaging all this money by giving it to poor people and blah, blah, blah. And I remember saying, it's very hard to make this argument when someone who has been poor is sitting in that room. You cannot tell me, oh, we should take away free lunch or free healthcare for children. When I have been on that, ask me if I would leave that room without making a stink and causing up a big fight about it, because it's much harder. It's much easier to say, oh, let's take away these benefits. Let's, cut back on this when no one who has ever benefited from that is sitting in that room. Right? When rich people and very privileged, well-off people are making these deals and governing and writing laws and legislation, they're so far removed to what it means to struggle to put gas in your car. I remember putting in $5 of gas in my car just so I can make it to work. Right? Or okay, I have $25. How much groceries can I buy? What is happening to people now with the rise of cost of goods? I don't know how people are surviving. If we don't have people in Congress who live those lives, they're not advocating and making arguments for why we need to protect the most vulnerable amongst our society.
Which is why representation is so important. When we talk about representation, Silky, you reminded me of the debate that we're having regarding abortion.
Right.
And just that in itself, that topic, these decisions that are made at the state level, does the Texas legislature, does it match the population of the state?
And we have statistics that show us this, and that's what sucks. We have these people in charge governing. It's minority rule to a certain extent, right? When the majority of the population, when 70% thinks no, there should be at least exceptions, or at least this, or there's some nuance to it. Yeah. And these states are saying no, they don't know what's happening. I have a friend who nearly died early. We're now in from school. And she was messaging me saying hey, I know you're plugged into this network. Can you help me? Can you help me? And the doctors wouldn't do anything. She was dying. Literally, it was horrible. It was horrible. And I was traumatized by proxy, just trying to figure out how can we help her? What can we do? These people who are making these laws, I think they're very far removed from the devastating effects that these horrible laws can have on people's lives, or maybe they don't care.
So to be clear, right? This idea of representation, these laws that are being made about women's reproductive
Yeah,
rights, women need to be there at the table to
right.
have those debates within the legislature. Right?
And we're seeing that across states, right? Where there isn't an equal, and I'm not saying that women all agree on this. We know that that's
Oh
not
yeah,
the case, but we also know that if it's not a 50-50 in terms of men and women, I actually don't think men should have a say in this argument. Don't have a uterus, no opinion. That's my personal belief system. But at the very least, there should be a majority of women at the table talking about this and
right.
discussing and debating. I quite frankly don't really care what a man has to say about my reproductive rights. And I find it very disheartening that that is what keeps happening at the state level when these
So
state legislatures meet.
so let me ask. This is perhaps a bad transition, but if I let me ask, would you consider running again?
I don't know. So the reason I ran was because a woman wasn't running in that
Okay.
year and a woman had never run. Now in every subsequent, I think there's been 2 midterms since my midterm, a woman has run in both, and it's different women. So that's like, I did the thing I was trying to do. So I don't feel as though I need to keep trying. I'm doing my PhD for now. I'm going to focus on using that PhD to start a nonprofit and get young girls involved in the political process here in Houston, because I think Texas holds the key to representation at the national level. And I think, at the end of the day, I'm an American, but I care so much about my home state, my hometown. And I want to put everything I can back into this state to just make sure that there's a fair shot at representation of all different kinds of people always. And I think that's what I plan on doing with my life. I mean, if something happens and I need to run, I say need. Hopefully that's never the case, but I don't think there should be any races without women in it.
And to be frank, I couldn't agree more.
Right?
I
Yeah.
don't see, we there's political science literature on this about representation and some of those barriers that women that are
Right.
unique to women about running for office. And I can't remember the study, I can't remember the author, but the takeaway from it was that men are more likely to run.
To see themselves as being
They not only do
the
they
natural person to run. Yeah.
not only do they see themselves doing it, but they will casually go, "Yeah, I'll run."
Yeah.
Women,
I mean, it's the same guys who are like, I could beat Serena in a tennis match. They just overestimate. I mean, it's nice. I wish all of us should have that confidence to just think we can do anything we want to do.
and the studies said that women don't have that. Like men would nonchalantly say, "Yeah, I'll
Right.
think about running." Women don't do that. They have this there's this sense of hesitation that there's not this thought that, yeah, I can do that.
And I can understand that. You're growing up, you look at when you're in elementary school, you around the room, most teachers will have all the presidents. It's a group of old white men and Obama.
Yeah.
What girl sees herself in politics when it's I mean, I was so happy to see Kamala be picked as VP because that's something. That's fine. Okay. She's not an elected position, fine, but that's like huge. I would have loved to see that as a child because young girls don't get to see that as much. It's better now. It was definitely missing when I was growing up. We had Hillary, and look how the media spent 35 years sort of just demonizing her for being a woman who dared to speak up and not play the first lady role quietly. Like she wanted to
But
move legislation and do things. And that's what I saw growing up. Oh, woman gets involved in politics. They're just going to comment on your haircut and pantsuit forever and insult you.
that's did you see a lot of that, if I may ask,
I
on the
did,
campaign
yeah.
trail?
And it was nonpartisan. I mean, everyone just all they did was focus on what she looked like. It was awful, I remember, because we would watch, Jay Leno and all those, my dad watches the news every night. It was always just hyper focused on this woman in a negative way.
No, but did you experience that?
Oh, I did have a few people, first of all, questioning my age,
Right.
questioning,
You mentioned that.
yeah, what does your husband think of this? I'm like, what? We could talk about what I'm here to talk about, and maybe not talk about my husband. And I remember when Imran would join me on events and stuff, people would ask me questions that they wouldn't ask the men, to the point to where I don't even process it. Because as a woman, you're just used to people asking you dumb stuff that is sexist. And he got sort of offended. Why are they asking you these things and they're not asking any of these other guys? I'm like, oh, because I'm a woman. Like, hello, we know the sexism exists. How is this surprising? He's like, I'm just, I can't believe that, liberals. I'm like, oh, everyone can be sexist. Liberal can everyone. It's a nonpartisan thing. Sexism is nonpartisan. And he was very offended on my behalf, sort of seeing it play out. People asking me about having children. How could I possibly do that if I'm going to have children? Blah, blah, blah. Just nonsense. That, again, unfortunately, women are used to hearing.
That's amazing. I can imagine, like, your husband probably thought, he was getting angry on, on along with you, or on your
On my
behalf,
behalf, yeah.
because he hadn't seen it. That was his first time to actually witness
Because you
it.
put yourself out there in a way that's
Yeah.
very different, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I've always been very fortunate that I've been sort of, I don't know, I'm kind of loud and I can be very confrontational. So people don't say crazy stuff to me for the most part in my personal or professional life. But this was one of those instances where you don't really defending yourself, and there's a fine line to walk, especially as a woman. You can be tough, but are you unlikable? Are you so tough you're unlikable? There's just this weird double standard as a woman running for office. You just can't defend yourself the way you would in your personal or professional life, because this is a different weird version of it, because you've got to be social and super approachable, but also very smart and very serious, because also no one thinks women know anything about foreign affairs. Research has shown that we understand education and healthcare, but other things, domestic, like foreign, I don't know, military type stuff, we don't know anything about geopolitics. We don't know about those things. And so there is this, I can't really spend my time being offended by someone being sexist to me, because I also have to prove that I know more about all these things than these other yahoos over here, which the debates help do that a lot, to prove that no, I'm also very smart. Like, I'm not just here for fun and games, which was nice, but it is a whole other. I had someone accuse me of trying to hide my ethnicity, because for my signs, I put my first name on it, because my first name is very memorable. And someone was like, oh, it's weird that you don't have your last name. Do you not want people to know you're Indian or something? Or that you're Muslim? I was like, well, I'm actually not Muslim. It's like my husband's last name. Well, are you hiding this from people? And it was I remember just being so taken aback by, that's like kind of racist. What is happening right now? I don't know what's going on. But you can't really argue. What am I going to do? Argue with people? It's a weird position to be in, because you can't. It's a public facing, you're sort of at the mercy of strangers in a lot of ways. I do think there should be boundaries and limits, but am I going to create this reputation for myself by checking some really old white guy for being racist? Is that worth it to me? Is that going to change anything? Probably not. So you just like, oh, interesting. And then like you move on. You just go talk to someone else. It's really weird. You're sort of adapting on your feet constantly, because people say some crazy stuff, man.
They do. And being on the campaign trail before in the past, I know this to be true.
And it's worse when you're a woman. And my mother-in-law pointed this out to me, because I hadn't really noticed this, but men would get very aggressive with me about my stances and positions on certain issues. But they wouldn't do that. And any woman right now who's watching this and listening totally knows what I'm talking about. There's just weird thing where guys will try to debate you when you have not consented, and they will keep trying to debate you in a private conversation if there's a few people, and they won't let you they won't let you. I'd be like, well, this is my answer, man. I don't know what else to tell you. But, and they feel this huge, like you're obligated to respond to them and answer them and take into consideration everything they've said. And it never happened to the men on the trail, but this happens to women all the time. I was just surprised at how persistent, because I'm used to being able to shut that down in my personal life if that happens.
Mhm.
But it was very shocking how, and it might have been different if there were many women in the primary as well. I don't know if just being the only one emboldened these douchey dude bros to do that. I have no idea, but that was a recurring sort of theme that everyone on my campaign noticed.
Well, I'm sorry to actually hear that.
Oh yeah, I mean, but we're
That's,
like, women are used to it. It's one of those,
but
oh,
should
you
they
think you
though?
know about this? Why don't you name every single XYZ about this to prove that you have knowledge on it? It's so annoying.
Well, I wonder how much of that had to do with your gender and how much of that had to do with your age. Because
Well, there was another guy who was a little younger than me on the trail, and no one ever treated him
really,
like that. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's one of those like, oh, I really like Marvel. Really? What is Thanos' birthday? If you really are into it, you would like just, and
yeah.
men do this to women all the time in other hobbies and interests and stuff. I was surprised that they felt bold enough to do it just like randomly at a campaign meet and greet. Be like, dude, I'm doing something. I do not have time for your nonsense right now.
So would you do it again? No.
It is, I think it's important to want to be involved. I'm not going to be like there are these people who are career campaigners. I think it works
Yeah.
out for some folks, and most people don't win their first race. I
Yeah.
think there's a statistic that shows most people do not win the first race that they've run for. So I have a chance to win somewhere, perhaps, if I was obsessed with the idea of being an elected official. And that has to be part of what drives you, because it's a huge commitment and sacrifice, and it takes its toll. And I'm just not into the idea of power like other people are, which is a necessary personality trait to possess in order to be in politics, because that is
So
what politics is. I mean, you guys are all in college. I'm sure you took a philosophy course. You read Plato, you read Aristotle. That is what politics is. It's this desire for power, but also maybe there's a little bit of good in there and you want to help people. But you've got to want the power, because otherwise you're killing yourself to campaign and blowing up parts of your life for something that doesn't even pay very much. So you've got to care a lot about being in power. And I just don't have that trait. I'm just not. Yeah.
Silky, I have to say that it's been a pleasure. I
This has
cannot
been
thank you
great.
enough.
Thank you for inviting me.
I cannot thank you enough for doing this with us and for speaking with us. Thank you so very much.
If you guys want to learn more, sorry, I woke up a little sick today, so my throat is acting up. I wrote a book about my time running for office, because when I was running for office and soon after, it's hard when you lose, it sucks. And I felt sad sometimes, like, man, I did this whole thing and it didn't matter. But then I started really thinking about it and being more kind to myself. And I realized that, hey, it does matter. And if people want to read about what it means to put yourself out there and fail, but life is still great and you got a lot out of it, I could write the book that does that, because I was looking for books like that about failed politicians and what does it mean? How did your life? And people just have these books that talk about their success. And at the end of my book, I didn't win. There is no triumphant victory, but there's a lot of victory in losing if you come at it with the right attitude and perspective. And that's sort of what I did. The book is called The Total Nobody Who Ran for Office and Lost-ish, because I didn't completely lose. I won some things along the way.
Absolutely. And I have to say, last final thought from me, that, elected officials, politicians, they do come from everyday life. Like President Ford, he was known for falling, for stumbling. I remember
LBJ was a teacher.
my second day of teaching ever. I fell. I literally I fell from my chair in front of a complete packed class of
Oh
32
my
students.
gosh.
So, yeah,
We all fail. It's fine.
yeah, exactly. When
But
I
you
say
gotta
fail,
try.
I fell onto my, yeah. But
You
anyways,
fell? Oh my goodness.
yeah, my chair went this way. Gravity made me go down that way. So,
And you're a stronger person despite it. There you
oh
go.
yes, yes. Silky, thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, John. I
And
appreciate it.
we'll talk to you soon.
And if any of your students have questions about running for office, you can find me. I'm on social. Mr. Patterson will give you my information. I'm always happy to help kids who want to, young people, not kids, sorry, young folks who want to get involved in the political process, volunteer for a campaign, whatever. I'm always available.
I have that information available for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Good night.